Highways stretch into the unknown, cutting through empty fields, dense forests, and shadowy mountains. They're paths to adventure, but also corridors for darkness. Tonight, we bring you 3 unsettling true highway scary horror stories, accounts that will have you gripping the steering wheel a little tighter and questioning every shadow in your rearview mirror. If you're a fan of chilling tales, creepy stories, and terrifyingly true events, this is your terror time. Stay tuned for these haunting whispers of highways where danger isn't always human. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more true scary horror stories and haunted tales. This story is about the hitchhiker who knew too much. It was late September when Aaron, a long-haul truck driver, found himself on an isolated stretch of highway in Colorado. The snow had started to fall early that year, covering the roads in a thick, slippery blanket. Aaron had been on the road for over 10 hours, exhausted but determined to make it to his next stop before midnight. The road was eerily empty, no headlights ahead, no taillights behind. As he rounded a bend, his high beams illuminated a figure on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman in a tattered coat, her thumb extended for a ride. Against his better judgment, Aaron slowed and pulled over. She climbed in without a word, her face partially obscured by the shadows of her hood. "Cold out there," Aaron said, trying to break the tension. The woman nodded but didn't reply. As they drove, Aaron tried again. "Where are you headed?" he asked. She finally spoke, her voice low and distant. "Just away." The hairs on the back of Aaron's neck stood up. Something about her presence felt off, too quiet, too still. He glanced at her hands and noticed she wasn't wearing gloves despite the freezing weather. Her fingers were pale and stiff, like frostbitten porcelain. After a few miles, she turned to him and said, "Be careful on this road." Aaron frowned. "Why's that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out an old, faded photograph. "Have you seen him?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Aaron glanced at the photo, a young man with a bright smile. "No, can't say I have," he replied, trying to focus on the road. When he looked back at the passenger seat, she was gone. Panic set in. Aaron slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. The seatbelt she had fastened still hung loosely across the seat, and the faint imprint of her presence lingered on the frosted window. When he reached the next truck stop, Aaron asked a local about the woman. The clerk's face went pale. "You saw her," they whispered. "That's Emma. She's been dead for 10 years, hit by a truck while looking for her missing fiancé." Aaron spent the rest of the night parked under the bright lights of the truck stop, haunted by the mocking laughter of his own doubts. Every shadow on the highway afterward felt like unseen eyes watching him, and the sound of the frost cracking against the windows became a haunting whisper he couldn't escape. Later that night, as the storm worsened, Aaron caught a glimpse of something in his side mirror, a shadowy figure standing just beyond the glow of the truck stop lights. His breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, just watched. The more Aaron stared, the clearer it became, the same tattered coat, the same pale hands. It was her. The longer he stared, the more distorted her face became, melting into a grotesque grin that stretched unnaturally wide. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to start the engine, but it sputtered uselessly. The cold seemed to seep into the cab, wrapping around him like icy fingers. Aaron fumbled for his phone, but the screen flickered, displaying a static-filled image. Beneath the distortion, words began to slowly appear, "He's still out there." Aaron's blood turned to ice. The air inside the truck grew heavier, suffocating him with a suffocating chill. He could hear faint whispers, a haunted tale unraveling in real time. It wasn't just Emma haunting these roads. There was someone, or something, else. Someone she was warning him about. That stretch of highway had a dark reputation, a place where ghostly shadows and haunting whispers coiled around travelers, pulling them into endless terror. Aaron would later learn that several drivers had vanished along that road, never to be seen again. Their vehicles were found, engines cold, doors wide open, but no trace of the drivers remained. The locals spoke in hushed tones about a figure who stalked the highway, blending into the fog and snow, hunting those unfortunate enough to cross his path. Aaron never drove that route again. But sometimes, late at night, when the frost creeps up his window and the wind howls through the cracks in his cab, he feels it, that suffocating chill, the weight of unseen eyes upon him. And in the darkest corners of his mind, he hears a voice, barely louder than a breath, "Be careful on this road." This wasn't just a true horror story, it was a terrifyingly true experience that left Aaron forever haunted. Highways aren't always empty. Sometimes, they're full of haunted tales, chilling scares, and ghostly horrors waiting just beyond the headlights. If this true scary horror story sent chills down your spine, make sure to like, subscribe, and share for more chilling accounts and terrifying tales. And remember, on dark, desolate roads, it's not always the living you should be afraid of. Stay safe out there, if you can. This story is about the roadside warning. Jesse and Nate were college students driving cross-country for the holidays. The stretch of highway they were on cut through endless desert, with no towns or gas stations in sight. It was nearing midnight when their car's low fuel light blinked on, casting a dim orange glow on the dashboard. As they searched for a gas station, Nate spotted a dimly lit sign pointing to an off-road rest stop. Relieved, they turned off the highway onto a narrow, gravel road. The further they drove, the darker it became. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunching of gravel beneath their tires. After driving for what felt like forever, they found the station. But something wasn't right. The building looked abandoned, its windows shattered, the pumps covered in graffiti. Rust dripped from the metal awning like bloodstains. Still, the faint glow of a neon "open" sign flickered in the corner of one window, casting eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. Jessie stepped out while Nate stayed in the car. She approached the door cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the empty lot. But before she could enter, a man appeared from the shadows. He was tall and thin, with a face that seemed hollowed out, his smile unnervingly wide. His sunken eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Need gas?" he asked, his voice dripping with something Jessie couldn't place, a mix of mockery and menace. "Why yeah," she stammered, feeling a chill crawl up her spine. The man gestured lazily toward the pumps, his smile never fading. Jessie turned back to the car, waving at Nate to get out. But as she did, the man leaned in close, his breath cold against her ear, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Jessie froze. "What do you mean?" she whispered back, her voice barely audible. "Just go. Don't look back," he said, his tone suddenly sharp, as if warning her of something lurking nearby. Jessie grabbed Nate, and they jumped into the car, panic surging through them. As they sped away, Jessie couldn't resist glancing in the rearview mirror. The man was gone, but a figure stood in the doorway of the building, a silhouette with glowing red eyes, staring after them. Its shape was barely human, more like a shadow wearing flesh. When they finally found another station hours later, they rushed inside and frantically told the clerk about the rest stop. The clerk's face paled. "That place has been abandoned for over 30 years, he said slowly. "They say it's cursed. People who stop there, they don't always make it out." Jessie and Nate couldn't shake the image of the man's hollow smile or the mocking laughter that seemed to echo in their ears. Every highway after that felt like a labyrinth of haunting whispers and ghostly shadows waiting to pull them in. The darkness of the road seemed heavier, and every distant figure in the shadows felt like it was watching them, waiting for them to stop. Weeks later, Jessie began to find strange things in her car. Small, unexplainable items appeared on the back seat, a rusted coin, a piece of frayed rope, and worst of all, an old gas receipt from a station that shouldn't exist. Each item reeked of gasoline and decay. No matter how often they cleaned the car, the smell of rust and oil lingered, like a ghostly reminder of where they had been. Nate's nightmares grew worse. He often woke up gasping, swearing he could hear footsteps circling their car, accompanied by faint, haunted whispers. Jessie, too, began to hear mocking laughter when she was alone, as if something had latched onto them from that forsaken place. It was as though the unseen eyes from that rest stop were still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Months later, Jessie's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a grainy photo of the same gas station, the neon sign glowing brighter than ever. Underneath it, a caption in shaky text read, "Still open. Still waiting." Jessie and Nate never spoke of the rest stop again, but the fear followed them like a shadow they could never escape. That forgotten station, with its chilling scares and creepy stories, had become part of their reality, a terrifyingly true nightmare they could never outrun. If this true scary horror story left you unsettled, make sure to like, subscribe, and share for more chilling tales and haunted stories. And remember, when you're driving alone at night, not every light on the road is meant to guide you. Some are meant to lure you in. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't look back. This story is about the Phantom Driver. Derek was driving home from a holiday party on a foggy December night. The road twisted through dense forest, and the mist clung to the pavement like a veil. The further he drove, the darker it seemed to get, the headlights barely cutting through the suffocating fog. He turned on his high beams, but the light only reflected back the dense fog, creating eerie shadows that danced along the tree line. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared behind him. The vehicle seemed to come out of nowhere, tailgating him so closely he could see the outline of the driver in his mirror, a figure wearing a hat, their face obscured by the darkness. Derek tapped his brakes lightly, hoping they'd back off. Instead, the car swerved violently, pulling alongside him. The driver rolled down their window, revealing a face Derek would never forget, pale skin stretched tight over hollow eyes, a grin that looked more like a grimace, twisted and unnatural. The driver mouthed something Derek couldn't hear, his lips forming slow, deliberate words. Terrified, Derek floored the gas pedal. The phantom car kept pace, its headlights flickering like a dying flame, casting ghostly shadows along the road. Then, without warning, the car swerved in front of him and vanished into the fog. Derek slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a stop on the slick pavement. He sat there, gripping the steering wheel, breathing heavily, as the oppressive silence of the forest enveloped him. When he finally reached the nearest town, Derek told his story to a local bartender. The man's face darkened. "You saw the phantom driver," he said in a low voice. "Legend has it he appears to those who are close to death, chasing them off the road. They say he was a racer who lost his life on these roads, and now his ghostly spirit hunts for company." But Derek couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some local ghost story. That night, long after leaving the bar, he heard the distant sound of tires screeching and faint mocking laughter echoing through the trees. It wasn't the wind, it was something else, something darker. The following days were worse. Every time Derek drove, he saw fleeting glimpses of headlights in his rearview mirror, only for them to disappear the moment he looked closer. His dreams were plagued with images of the phantom driver, grinning from the shadows, mouthing the same words over and over, "You're next." Weeks later, Derek noticed deep scratches along the sides of his car, long claw-like marks etched into the paint. They hadn't been there before. It felt like a warning, a reminder that the phantom driver was still following him, lurking just beyond the edge of sight. Even in broad daylight, Derek couldn't escape the sensation of unseen eyes watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. His friends tried to reassure him, but Derek knew better. He had crossed paths with something terrifyingly true, a force that thrived in the fog and shadows of forgotten highways. Derek refused to drive at night ever again, but the haunting whispers of screeching tires and the echo of that grim smile haunted his every waking moment. To this day, Derek warns others about the dangers of lonely roads and the legend of the phantom driver. But not everyone listens. Some drivers laugh it off, until they see those flickering headlights in their mirror, until they hear the faint sound of mocking laughter trailing behind them. If this true scary horror story chilled you to the bone, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more haunted tales, creepy stories, and terrifyingly true encounters. And remember, next time you're driving down an empty road and see headlights appear out of nowhere, don't slow down. Because some highways lead straight into the shadows. And some drivers never stop chasing. These chilling accounts remind us that highways aren't just roads, they're gateways to the unknown. From mocking laughter in the fog to unseen eyes in the shadows, the next time you're on a deserted stretch of road, remember these terrifying tales. If you enjoyed these true scary horror stories, hit the like button, subscribe, and share for more haunted tales and creepy stories. Stay safe out there, and always keep your headlights bright, because you never know what might be waiting in the dark.